Hola, bienvenidos. Hello, my name's Laia and today I'm going to be talking about something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time and make a video about for a long time, but here I am making it and I'm so excited. So this video is about my language learning journey and where I am and how it went and why I failed, and I failed miserably. So first I'm going to talk about everything I used that just didn't work, why I failed, all those reasons, and what I'm doing now that is hopefully making a difference and hopefully I'm actually learning the language. So how this all started is that I am a Spanish dancer. And I do flamenco. If you haven't heard of that, it's the dance with the castanets and the fans and the shawls and the tail. There's a lot of things. Anyway, so one day I went to a flamenco course with someone who has been to Spain and learned to speak Spanish. And she was speaking Spanish in the course, she was using it, and that just immediately spiked my interest and I just wanted to know what she was saying. And even the simplest things, she would even just say E and I'd be like, what is that weird sound she's making? Anyway, so Spanish was not actually the first language ever that I've been interested in. I was actually interested in Russian before I was interested in Spanish, but I've always been super scared of Russian. Russian just seems very, very scary. So I'm just gonna push it aside for now. It's a different script, it's a Slavic language, it's not a phonic language, so I'm just not gonna go there. Whereas with Spanish, I have wanted to learn Spanish now for a long time, and this course I took was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a long time that I've been trying and I've been unsuccessful. Okay, so I'm going to start with all the resources I tried that just didn't work. And obviously, we all know the first one is Duolingo. Duolingo is where everyone goes to learn a language, and there are many language learners and polyglots who really dislike Duolingo. I've watched a few videos of people who have used it and have been successful and can now use the language, but I think that's a very small majority of people and maybe they were using the app a bit differently. But anyway, I used Duolingo. I had a streak every single day. I did Duolingo. I had months worth of streaks. I have a huge points because you get points like XP, like it's a game, and I have so many, and you get crowns, and I have something in like the 200 crowns, and I just really was whizzing by on Duolingo. I was an expert, I was so good, I was getting it, but the problem is that it became a memory game. Every day I went on, I could remember what I did, like a memory game type of thing, and as soon as I put the app off, that information was no longer in my head because I didn't actually back it up. It was literally just a memory game. So Duolingo did teach me some vocabulary, and when I say some, I mean really little. It taught me mujer and leche. What else? I don't know what else. And then I also tried some other apps. I just downloaded a few apps that I heard of and tried to use them, but just seriously, apps just did not work. I didn't like them. I used to like them. I don't like them anymore. I just cannot work with an app. Then what I also did was I got books. So I got a few books. I was like, okay, I want to learn Spanish. I was really determined. I was really into it. And I really wanted to succeed. And so obviously what you do when you want to learn a language and succeed, you buy language learning books. Now I must admit, I did not do a lot of research before I bought them. I did a little bit, but the books I bought obviously just did not work, and I will show them to you now. So the first one I got was Everything Kids Learning Spanish book, and in my head I was like, okay, this is great, this is for children, it's gonna be easy, it's gonna be fun, there's gonna be activities. So what I really wanted in a book was something that I could write in and do activities on and, you know, actively learn. And that's why I thought this would be great, because I'm like, okay, language learning games and activities. But when you open the book, it is a list of grammar words. And yes, there are activities, but they are things like that, and that, and that, and that. So yes, was it a little bit of fun? Sure. But it didn't teach me anything. And maybe this will come in handy when I'm looking for vocabulary words. I can maybe reference this later on. And I'm not saying this is totally useless. I'm not saying this is a bad book. But I'm not going to learn to speak Spanish from a list of words. Then comes the ultimate book of books. I thought I was making a real good investment with this one. And yes, I'm going to use this later. But did it work as a beginner? No, and that is Spanish for Dummies. All in one. So this one includes Spanish for Dummies, Intermediate Spanish, Spanish verbs, and Spanish for Dummies audio set. It also comes with a CD, and this book is great. I'm not putting it down. This book has a lot of information, and I'm definitely going to reference it. I'm going to use it in my studies, but it's not going to teach me to speak the language. It's just not. This book is more factual. It's like a grammar book that is just facts. It tells you this is how it's done, this is the conjugation, this is the verb order, these are your verbs. I think really good for reference, and there's a lot of specific topics in here. So if I ever want to talk about something specific or do research about a specific topic, I can do this in here, and it will be helpful for fact checking and information checking. Then another book I got was First Spanish Reader, and I thought this would be brilliant. I'm like, okay, this is a Spanish reader for beginners. It's the first Spanish reader. It's going to help me. It's a beginner's dual language book. Little did I know that even though there is Spanish on one side and English on the other, I still did not understand anything because I just did not like these stories. The first story is called El Burro de Buridan, and it's about a donkey. And then later, way later, actually years later, I discovered that this book was published in 1988. 1988. And yes, does it have famous authors? Yes. But do I want to read about topics written in 1988? No. And it even has sections like, love, said the rose, is a perfume. Love is a murmur, said the water. Love is a sigh, said the zephyr. I've never even heard that word. Love, said the light, is a flame. Alas, how you have lied. Love is a tear. Beautiful, but not for beginners. I'm sorry, I'm going to read this one day. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to read it. But I'm not going to learn the language from this. I'm just not. I'm not. So this will come in handy one day. But that day is not today. That day is when I'm a bit more advanced. Then another book I had was a gift, which I'm so grateful for. My best friend bought me this, and seriously, so grateful. And that is Unlocking Spanish by Paul Noble. So this is your key to language success, it says. Okay, this book is not bad. It's not bad, but it's very much about memorization. And even though this book says it's not about memorization, it's about memorization. This will come in handy when I need some reference for talking points and how to say things. I seem to remember it was very focused on how to order at a restaurant, how to do things like that. But as you can see, there are lists of words, and that is basically what this book is. Lists and lists and lists and lists of words in translation. And the point is to cover the one side, translate. Cover the other side, translate. So it's a very translation-focused book. And once again, translation does not stick in my head. I can translate things as much as I want. As soon as I close that book, the information's gone. It's just not there anymore. Even though I've mentioned all these books, and even though I said they were not successful, I will still be going back to them. I'm not going to be throwing them away, but I will be keeping them to go back to and to reference and to use as supplementary material. Then what I also did is I made notebooks. Obviously, I love stationery, I love notebooks, I want to write things down, so I don't have them to show here, but I had 2 notebooks. One of them I used to write down all the grammar points from Duolingo. So in Duolingo, there are grammar points, grammar explanations before you do the activity, so I wrote down all of them. Needless to say, they were pretty useless. Then I also had another book where I made notes from Spanish for Dummies. That didn't teach me anything because it went from 0 to this much. I'm making this sound bad because I bet a lot of people can learn from these books and learn a language using books like these. Then I also had this little teeny tiny one, which I figured I'd use for vocabulary. I only got 5 words in because obviously it didn't work. I wrote a word, wrote the translation. Could I remember these words? Absolutely not. Every time I would think of what that word is, I couldn't remember it. Then I started writing sentences. So this was this year when I started trying again, but I just don't use this book. I just don't. So I got this tip from Luca Lampariello. He uses a little book like this, writes a sentence, writes a translation, but he likes the translation method. But for me, I'm just not sure. So as you can see, many things have failed me, and I have failed as a language learner. I have found this so difficult, and I just could not get it right, no matter how determined I was, how much time I spent. But I must say, having the majority of my time spent on Duolingo was not helpful. I also listened to the Duolingo podcast, which they promote and which some language learners also recommend and say is good. I did enjoy the podcast, it was good. I understood some of what I was listening to, but not all of it. And generally, the Duolingo podcast is not bad. I would recommend it. It is a good way to listen to the language, to get input. But my big problem with the Duolingo podcast is that they did not speak in the accent that I wanted. And that has also been a huge thing for me, is that I specifically want the accent from Spain. I want a Spain Spanish accent. So I specifically wanted to use the sounds instead of the S sounds, like the TH sounds where the Z's and the C sound like ow, like TH instead of the S's, and that's how all the other Spanish speaking languages sound. And most of these podcasts have that accent, and in my opinion it just didn't help me to listen to things in an accent that I did not want. Especially as a beginner. I think when I'm more advanced that will be okay, but as a beginner I need to focus on the accent that I want. Then what I also used was a Spanish YouTube series, or it was a Spanish series but on YouTube, and I will show it to you here. And honestly, this is very good. I have nothing bad to say about this. It's a bit funny, it's like entertaining, it uses very beginner Spanish and it's a good way to learn. Did I understand everything? No. But was it in the right accent? Yes. And I would recommend this. I really would. So from that series, I watched this a few years ago. It was probably 2 years ago now. I haven't gone back to it. But the one thing I remember was el horno, because there was something in the oven. And so now I know that word because of that, because they were pointing and it was very dramatic and they said el horno. So I know that word now. So that series was not a waste of time. That series is also dubbed into many languages, so that's pretty cool. Then I also tried listening to Spanish music, but unfortunately I have not yet found Spanish music that I enjoy. So I would just put on the top hits of in Spain and listen to them, but I honestly didn't enjoy them. So I need to actually do some more research and find Spanish music that I like. Okay, so those were all the things I've been using throughout the past 3 or 4 years to try and learn Spanish, and they have all failed me. So now what I will talk about is what I am doing now, how I have changed things, and how I will hopefully learn the language. So the first thing I did this time, the first thing was research. I did so much research. I spent a few days, probably even a week, just researching. What I found after my research was the polyglot community on YouTube, and let me tell you, I love them and I'm subscribed to some of them now and I watch the videos, and they just give so many good tips, so much advice. A lot of them have resources, and it feels good to take advice from people who have successfully learned a language, or many languages in their case. So what I did was I gathered all the advice, all the resources that I could get. So I went through everyone I could watch, and specifically a lot of them have Spanish videos for Spanish resources. I specifically watched them. I made lists of resources to use, and then what I did was I went through them to see what would actually work for me and what I actually want to use. After crossing out a few resources that I didn't want to use, I started focusing on the ones I did. I downloaded a bunch of apps on my iPad, but to be very honest, I have yet to use them because I just don't like them. I just discovered that I don't like apps. And I bet there are some good ones out there, but most of the good ones cost money, and even the ones who cost money I've watched reviews on and they just don't seem right for me. So what I started with was Language Transfer. Language Transfer is a free language learning app. They have quite a few languages, and I listened to their Spanish one. So what it is, it's a list of audio lessons that you listen to, and it is someone teaching someone else Spanish and talking about the rules. But the way they do this is very, very interesting, and the way he explains the language is very interesting and very helpful. So what I did was I started listening, but I got to about lesson 15 and I was completely lost. Completely lost. I did not know what was going on. So they do recommend that you don't write anything down, you don't make notes, you just listen. But because I was so lost just from listening, I started the whole course over, started from lesson 1, and I made notes as I went. They weren't neat or anything, they were just written. And in that course you are supposed to answer with your own voice, you're supposed to give the answers. So what I did was I would pause it, write my answer, speak it out loud, and then play again. And that just worked so much better for me. I'm about more than halfway through now, but I did stop and I'll tell you the reason why soon. So if you are wanting to learn a language, Language Transfer is the #1 resource I recommend to you. It's amazing, and seriously, just check it out. It's so much better than all the other apps. I do believe I will be going back to the Spanish YouTube series that I mentioned before. I think that would be very good for listening practice, for comprehension and comprehensible input, which I learned is a very important thing, and I was not getting comprehensible input before. So I will be listening to that, and the great thing about that is that they do have the accent that I want. Another thing I have done is research about YouTube channels. So the #1 YouTube channel I'm watching at the moment is Dreaming Spanish. Dreaming Spanish is amazing because he makes videos that are level appropriate. So he has super beginner Spanish, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So obviously I started with super beginner Spanish because I'm still a super beginner. I'm not even A1 yet, even after all these years, which is really sad. But I'm listening to that, and that is comprehensible input. And the way he does it, he draws things while he writes them. He does hand gestures, he shows, and that just really helps to understand the language. And he also speaks in the accent that I want, so that's very helpful. So in terms of the accent, I have purposefully only focused on resources that have the accent that I want, and I believe that is a very important thing. Otherwise my brain is just going to get so confused. My brain is already overwhelmed with all this new information. It doesn't need to be even more overwhelmed with different accents. So when I had my list of resources, I went through all of them and I crossed out all the resources that didn't have the right accent. And that seems harsh, but I think it's a really important thing for me. Another thing that has also helped is finding what works for me. So I watched so many polyglots, and the thing with polyglots is that every single person recommends something that works for them, and every single person's recommendation is different. This person swears that this thing works, this person swears that this works, and so on. So what's really important is finding what works for me, and to be very honest, that is difficult. It's not easy to find. Even 3 years later, I'm still figuring it out. And it's difficult to find what works for you, especially if you have never learned a language by yourself before, because this is the first language I am learning by myself. I am already bilingual, but I was born bilingual, so that doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to save the grand finale for last, but one more resource that I do have and I'm very excited about are these books by Ollie Richards. Ollie Richard is a polyglot who has learned many languages, and he writes books in many languages. And these are specifically for beginners. So the first one is 101 Conversations in Simple Spanish, and this just contains like dialogue, and it's actually a story. It follows a story using dialogue so that you can learn spoken Spanish. Now, only after I bought these, I did buy them online, so I don't blame myself for not seeing this, but it does say it is for A2 to B1 level. It says it over there. Okay, and obviously I'm not A2 yet, I'm not even A1 yet. So I'm going to be using these just to get some input, just to get the language in my brain, even if I don't understand all of it. I think these are still great and I think they will be very useful. The second one is short stories in Spanish, and on the side it says here for beginners. So these are easy short stories in Spanish. And what they do is they have the chapter, and after the chapter they have a summary, and then some vocabulary words and questions. And also in the beginning of the book it tells you how to read the book and how to best use the book to learn the language. So that's very exciting and I'm excited to use those. And the good thing about those is that they are fun, engaging, modern stories, not stories from 1988. You can find those books in many different languages if you are interested. Then the icing on the cake, the big finale of what is really making the difference. And that is that I got a teacher. I have a Spanish teacher and I'm so happy. So for the longest time, for years and years, I did not want a teacher because I would watch videos 3-4 years ago about how to learn a language, and every single video said that you need to speak to natives. And I was like, how am I supposed to speak to natives? I don't know any natives. How am I supposed to do that? And then they would say that you go on these apps and you talk to native people. And in my brain, that sounded so wrong. I was like, I'm not going on a random app and speaking to a random person. That was way out of my comfort zone. And obviously, when you're a beginner in a language, speaking is very difficult. So the whole concept of going on an app and speaking to someone was just twisted in my brain. I did not actually know what it was about. Fast forward to now, I have become an English and Afrikaans teacher on italki. So I am a language teacher on one of those apps after for years and years saying that I'm not sure about going onto an app. Now I'm a language teacher, and that is what opened the door for me to get a teacher. I did a lot of research. At first I couldn't find a teacher that worked for me, but eventually I found one that I really liked, and I really wanted her. She comes from Barcelona, so she has the right accent, and the course that she's taking me through is just so good. I'm loving it, and she's a really good teacher. So that is what is making all the difference. And I'm actually speaking now, I'm actually learning, and I'm not only learning grammar, but I'm learning to speak and to listen to her. I'm still at the stage where listening is very difficult. If she speaks to me in Spanish, it just goes over my head. But I'm learning and I'm getting there, and with every lesson it's getting better, and it's so convenient for me. So there you have it. That is my Spanish learning journey. I hope this was interesting, maybe a little bit helpful. And if you are learning a language, good luck. If you are learning Spanish, good luck. Let me know how it's going, how far you are. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.